Welcome back, Internet. This is another Gushing Pear Hollow Knight discussion. This time, we're delving into gameplay, which just happens to be my favorite portion. So what I want to do is break this gush down into two parts. The first part is going to lay the groundwork. It's going to be called Learning Yourself the Basics. This is the point where the game will teach you what you can expect going forward. And by breaking this part down, you'll get an understanding of what to expect from the game as a whole. Right after that grand entrance, the health bar pops up on the screen, and the first obstacle appears in front of you. It is at this point that you have to smash using your nail. The game has just taught you that obstacles need to be destroyed, and it gives you its first moving obstacle, an enemy. So, you destroy this enemy. Moving on, you find another obstacle, one that can't be destroyed, but something you need to jump over. And you can actually take that and jump over and onto enemies, while also attacking. At this point, I'm sure you've realized that you've been collecting something. Well, that's money. It's called Geo in this game. It comes from both enemies and caches. After collecting your moolah, it is time to do a little platforming, and it's at this point that you discover your first hazard. If you don't avoid it, yes, that stalactite can hit you, and it will cause some damage. You will see that a little later on. Next, the game teaches you about interaction, and through that interaction, you're taught how to use your soul that you've been accumulating after killing enemies. That soul can be used to heal. And now it's time to see the very first enemy variety. It's at this point that you put together what you've already learned to try to kill this enemy. This is a really good place to really show exactly what happens when the platforming and enemies come together. Notice that hitting an enemy pushes you off the platform a little, right into some spikes, which is yet another hazard that you're going to come across a lot. It's going to respawn your character next to that healing text. That's to emphasize, hey, don't forget, you can heal. The process is slow. Notice how it takes a little bit for the mask to come back. That is something to consider when in the middle of a fight. After having just been wrecked by those spikes, it's a pleasure to see the enemy smote by a falling stalactite. So enemies can also be harmed by hazards. What is this little doodad, you ask? Well, as we've been taught for everything else, you smack it with your nail, and immediately you're met with some blue jellies. Hitting the jellies gives you more masks, so that is a way to increase your mask total. However, you'll learn a little later, that's going to be temporary. The knight comes across a small pitfall. Those are very prevalent in the world of Hollow Nest, and sometimes if you play your cards right, you can actually make out for the better, and sometimes it's just a straight hazard drop. This is the time I was warning you about. The knight falls into the spikes and loses one of those blue masks. And notice that it only goes away. It doesn't empty out the way the normal masks do. That's because it is indeed temporary. Continuing with that platforming and hazard avoidance, you're going to come across another stalactite. However, this one is actually very useful. In case you didn't notice, there was a dark space underneath. When probed, it actually holds a secret. If you really think about it, you were able to pogo off of enemies, so why not try pogoing off of the hazard? And lo and behold, it works. It lets you get across this gap. The reward for the effort is a bit more story, which you get by reading, and a treasure chest. Now that treasure chest, when struck, just like everything else you're taught to do, reveals a charm. Now that charm is actually something you can't use right now, but it will come in handy later. I remember my first playthrough, I didn't realize that the charm was there. I didn't realize that you can hop on the spikes. I made a mental note to come back, however I actually forgot. So when I was searching for some of the last charms I was missing and using the internet for help, that's when I ended up finding that one and realized how much of a fool I was. But that's what I find so gush-worthy about this game, that it makes you think outside the box. So like if I had paid attention, it would have been very easy to figure out, hey, maybe try this. Another important note is that the game is going to force you to back travel. Take that into consideration as you play, because there's going to be sections where you go off the beaten path and you have to find your way back. So memorizing your way really helps in this scenario. The knight comes across an obstacle. Just like any other obstacle, you're supposed to destroy it. But just notice something. That obstacle is reinforcing. So if you were to walk across the top of that section, you wouldn't be able to break through because it's being reinforced. However, because you're underneath and at the end that can be destroyed, it opens up the path both ways. Something to keep in mind. And now with some fresh freedom, it's time for the little knight to explore. Notice that you come across a sheer drop as soon as you leave the first area, and there's 0 fall damage. Continuing forward, your first discovery, Dirtmouth. In that town, you will find an NPC to talk to. There are friendly bugs that you can actually speak with, and you do this by interacting, which is something that you've learned earlier in the playthrough. And then you sit down on a bench, and if you remember, you were told about sitting on the benches. And it's here that you can A, heal, B, save, and C, equip some charms. You have charm notches, and each charm has a cost. That's one thing to remember when you acquire all your charms, and there are going to be plenty. So after messing around in the menus and your charms, you can then decide to check around the town. The first thing you can interact with after leaving your bench is a sign telling you that the shop is going to be opened soon, so you know there's going to be a map shop. And you also know the names of the bugs that are going to run it. Continuing in the rightmost direction and avoiding falling into the well, because that is actually how you progress. So for now, we're going to go past that, and you're going to come across a door that has a simple lock. Now notice it specifies it's a simple lock, meaning there's probably something called a simple key. That's something to consider for later. And now it's time to delve into Hollow Nest. By diving down, you come across a new discovery, which is a new area. Oh hey, you heard that, right? That was Cornifer. You'll hear him at various points in your adventure, and you'll know he's somewhere nearby. You can also see, lying on the ground all around him, and leading up to him, the paper strewn about. That's also another indicator, the visual indicator. So it's nice to have that. Talking to him, he offers to sell you the map of the area, and it's really great to then see the entire area that you can explore. Cornifer will tell you about his wife, Iselda, who is the map shop runner. She will be there anytime you go back up to the surface. So let's cut to that. Iselda will be there, ready to take an order from you. At this point, you can choose to order some charms, some pins, or other map upgrades. And that's really nice to allow the adventuring to be a little easier, a little smoother. It is at this point in the game, the introduction/tutorial type part is pretty much at its end. Everything else going forward will be a mashup of all of the previous sections. So at this point, we can truly gush about the gameplay because from here on, it's just all into the unknown. This is going to be fun.